All right, so you know me, Mike. We were tasked, well, the club, prior to field day, kind of talked about how we can get people to be able to use radios that don't have access normally. And that was the initial concept, and some ideas are thrown around, and one of them was, well, why don't we get that flex going and use that remotely? And so I took up the task. Didn't know anything about the flex, so I had to learn the software. I had to fix it. I actually needed a new SD card that you may have heard about. So you need to fix the radio, get up and running, and then understand how it worked. And it's a very complex system, as you saw from my demo a few weeks ago. It's not unlearnable, but it's challenging and probably has more capabilities than most people need. So we had an answer, we had an ability to use it, and we're trying to figure out a way to get it out to the club, but I can just tell it's going to take a bit. It's going to take some one-on-one training. And no, I'll see no other way to teach people other than one-on-one sessions, just to talk through the basic stuff. And the other problem was there's no safeguards on the radio. So you can't stop people from connecting to an antenna that's not there and transmitting. You can sort of keep them from transmitting out of band, but even that can be bypassed by somebody, either by accident or on purpose. So it requires a bit of training to make sure that things aren't done wrong accidentally anyway. So I'm still looking. I'm looking for a way to be able to share the radio out to everybody in a more simpler manner than most people want. Most people are just going to want voice. A few may want some digital stuff. Most just going to want voice. And I don't remember how I got to this particular website. And I really don't remember. I don't remember what I was searching for, but I wasn't searching for what I got. I was on the Flex Radio forums, which are very good, very thorough, wealth of information. And I was reading it somewhere. Again, I'm looking for the same subject, some kind of remote thing, and then this popped up, this remotehams.com, and I was like, what is this? And so I dig through it. This is a website. The software is written by a ham, and the ham runs this website, and remotehams.com. And we are, well, rather than trying to waste time explaining it verbally, let me show you. So I'm going to switch screens here for a second. All right. So I'm going to disconnect right now. So if you see on the screen, it may be too busy for you to see, but right here in the middle are a stack of radios that are online. These are all radios that you can log into. As a minimum, you can listen to Australia, Brazil, Canada, Germany, USA, Sweden, blah, 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 blah. So all those radios are remotely available. And that's really what the concept of the software was, is that you could share out your radio to the world so people could go and listen. Well, a byproduct of that is you can actually set it up so that the world is blocked out and nobody can see your radio for club purposes. And that is what, well, I was hooked up to my test bed. It's the same interface, basically. So in our software, the way it'll be set up is you first log in, depending on which radio you log into, and we'll talk about that in the future, but right now it's just a flex, so ignore this says the ASU, that's what I'm working on right now. But you first log into our radios, you get this, right? And now you have the radio. This is tuning a radio. Now in this case, it's just a simulation run on another computer. But this is going to be your interface. And you have access to the tuners, all this other stuff, upper sideband, lower sideband, all this. This is going to be a little bit different depending on what radio is connected to, but it's all there. So for audio stuff, it's set up. On this demo, I don't know where the transmitter is, so if I show you our radio, so now this is live. This is the flex right this second. And it says, welcome to the Cowtown ARC Flex 6500. And I had it set up for digital, so let me change this. Must reconnect. All right. Disconnect, reconnect. So there should be audio coming out of it, but you know how it is with live TV. Yeah, I don't hear anything. Imagine there's audio coming out of it. Oops. There's live television, folks. Anyway, back to my test bed. So, in fact, let me go back to that their website. So if you follow Randy's documents, you'll have to sign up. So go to Remote Ham's website, and you'll have to, eventually you have to sign up. But you can at least download the software first and sign up then. And we're using this client up here. It's they're calling it their public alpha, so that means it's not complete, but it works just fine. And we're using this latest version. When you sign up, the requirement, and this is in Randy's documents, is you use your call sign. That's your login name in all lowercase letters, right? So in my case, it's KFIDEY in all lowercase letters. That's the standard for the site, so that it's a little bit more command and control. But also, David asked this question. So how does it work? So you can see right here, there's a club manager, right? Well, the club member, that's me. I'm the only club member of this testbed radio. So, and this keeps resetting. I take it back. It's working fine now. So you can see we're not visible on remote hams. Transmit is allowed. It's club mode, privacy from guests. So nobody else can see in. These are all the people that can transmit. Again, one of one. If we have rotators and stuff like that, that goes in that section. And then here are all the members. So this is where you can actually adjust what they can do, including frequencies. And then overall on the radio, you can allow certain frequencies, allow different frequencies for transmit. And you can see I kind of put some, actually that was there. I didn't put any of that stuff in there. But you kind of see you could put some bands in there to transmit or not transmit on. Now the Flex software, that's already done. So I don't have to cover it. I can set it up where it won't transmit outside these bands that work well with the antenna. On the Yaesu, though, I'll have to manually put that in. But like I said, you'll get a database with all the activity. So we keep it to our club members, and if something happens that's weird, we can go back and figure out what happened. And not so, not for punitive reasons, just so we can try to figure out what happened and maybe fix it. So once you sign in with your call sign and you have a account there, you'll want to get on our system, and in that case you'll contact me or Mark, or whoever ends up adminning the thing, and we'll add your name to the list. And if you saw on the Groups.io page, there's a section for the remote users. It's going to be members only, and that way, if there's any news or things, you can go there and look for it, as well as we're building a calendar of some sort to use it, just for deconfliction. Right now, we're just going to use the Groups.io calendar. You'll enter your stuff there, but in the future, we hope to have something a little more polished and more automated, so the system turns on and for you ahead of time. One of the weak areas of this, between how we're interfacing with the Flex and with the Yaesu, is if the radio is off, then the thing just dumps. So we'll have to essentially reboot the computer, for lack of a better term, with the radio on to make sure it all lines up again. So that's an extra step, which is not a problem. If we know in advance if it's going to be on, we just turn it on and it's good to go. But we don't want to leave the radios on 24/7, so we'll need some kind of schedule so that we don't leave the radios on 24/7, and so that if somebody wants to use it and they want to use a certain band, they know they won't conflict with somebody else on the other radio trying to use the same band. And Bud is going to kind of look into if we have a problem with that. But this is planned that if somebody's on, for example, the Yaesu on 20 meters, we're not going to use the Flex on 20 meters, right? That seems to make sense to me. So once you have your call sign, your login, you're going to add the radio. I'm not going to show what the website is, but I'll show you how it works in our case. You're going to put a name in it and testbed, bed, and here's where you put where our radio is. And I'm going to put where my testbed is. We are using server volume version 7. There is no server version 9 that I know of, right? And so choose version 7. Don't choose version 9. It defaults to version 7, so it shouldn't be a problem. What happens if you choose version 9, you'll get a bunch of different stuff that doesn't match what we're talking about. So don't need to worry about this, but this will depend on which radio we're using. And right now, the Flex is set up with these ports, but I haven't given out the IP address. So now it's going to try to log in, and here it is. It's logged in my test bed, and as far as it's concerned, it's a real radio, right? So I kind of mentioned what's available, and it's kind of a busy screen, but you won't see all this stuff on our radios. It'll just be what the radio can actually support. And so right now, it's some extra buttons. But somewhere in here, and actually I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Here's where you transmit. And if you want to do something more advanced, your own physical push-to-talk or keyers or that kind of stuff, there's information on the remotehams.com website on how to do that, but that's going to be outside the scope of anything I do. But for transmitting, that is your push-to-talk, just clicking the TX button. And I don't think I can demonstrate it here, but let me see. If I TX, how about this? You can sort of see it up here in the very top. You can see green and red, and that is your VU meter for audio. And you can see the mic's turned down a little bit. If I turn the mic up a bit and I talk real close, I should see a lot more red. Again, it's a demo, right? So it's not really doing it. But this will be your feedback for if you're going out too strong as far as leaving the radio or leaving the application. Double check. I'm sharing out the application, right? Yeah, okay. So that'll be your feedback on the VU meter, right? That's your TX. And notice it does lock in the TX position. You have Vox available. Personally, I would never use Vox, but that is an option. So you can see that coming across and to adjust your settings. As far as the input to the radio, that'll already be set, so you shouldn't be overdriving that part of it. As long as this looks good, you should be good going out, as far as we know. Like I said, we're in the test. We're still in the test stage until we figure out that we've got it all figured out. So you may come up with something the rest of us haven't seen before. You'll see on the Flex that you only have one antenna choice. There's two buttons, but one is disabled because we only have one antenna attached to it. Tuner is ATU. The Flex has a tuner. All the antennas, the antenna connected right now, all the bands that are available for you to actually tune to, that the Flex will let you transmit on, are all under 2.0 SWRs. So you won't hurt the radio. But I've actually gone through all the different bands, and I've tried different things and tunes, so they should all have already been tuned out anyway. It'll go to a memory mode, so it won't need auto-tune. But it's a pretty good practice just to auto-tune anyway, right? So you hit the ATU, it'll cycle the auto-tune in the Flex, and you'll see some other different displays in the Flex when it's doing this auto-tune. But, and that's why I wanted to run the test bed and not the real radio. But it'll be pretty obvious what's going on. There's a bypass and some other things you might have seen. Some of this other stuff is just for how you look at the radio. If we come over here on the far side, this is also part of the your access. So you can kind of see down at the bottom, and hopefully you can see this. Maybe I'll go wider screen, maybe that helps. This window can be shrunk. And this can be also tabbed by clicking these. So that hides them. So if you ever just see, like on the right, so you can kind of see some tiny little dots over there, tiny little wording, that means they've just been tabbed. You click on them, they come back. So you may have your manual key in for the frequency as well as the bands hidden. This is how you switch the bands. You go to 80 meter, or you go to 40 meter, or in our case 17, 12, 10, and 6. and it'll just jump you through that band. And then from there, you can do the spinner, or you can manually type in a frequency. Those are both options available. If it's a dual tuner or a radio that has a B tuner, this will tune the backside. And on this demo, it doesn't have that. But this would be your B side, and the Flex will do it. It doesn't swap very well, so I'm not sure what it's set up for. The drivers to run the Flex on the software are pretty new. So maybe there's some more things coming up. But theoretically, you should be able to have a different frequency and then swap back and forth, right? Different primaries, or run split-offs, right? You have one set up for listen and one set up for transmit. And I think that's how they actually set up in the software. And you'll see, I think it'll say split or something in there. So here's your modes. And normally, the Flex will automatically switch. And this, the way it works, if you haven't used computerized radio controls, they use CAT, which stands for computer. What does it stand for? Basically, it's computer control of a tuner. And that means that your computer is interfacing through the CAT system to the radio, and they're talking back and forth. So the radio is telling the tuner or your front panel what it's doing. At the same time, your front panel is making demands off your radio. And the reason I'm bringing that up is if you swap this down into 80 meter on the Flex, it'll switch automatically into lower sideband because the radio knows that that's where lower sideband is. Now, there are some other choices on the Flex, which is, and they didn't show on these, but there's if you're using digital modes, there's upper sideband, there's digital, D-I-G-L-U, and D-I-G-L-L. And for most digital operations, it's always upper sideband. So it's digital upper. And what that does is that takes a lot of the your processing and things out of the signal, so you get a more pure signal going to the Flex from the software. In our case, it doesn't care what's attached to it. It's just using software through the Flex software to the radio. And we use that for the digital modes only. But for regular voice stuff, you're going to be obviously upper sideband, lower sideband, and the radio will switch. If it happens to be, and the reason I'm bringing it up is you see it, and it says DigiU. Well, that means it's taking all the filtering out, and it's only the digital mode. So select your regular upper sideband if that's what you want. Some of those things you'll just have to play with and get a feel for. Down here, you'll see a variety of different gains and filters all through here, as well as somewhere down the bottom, I think is in here, RF gain. So this is where you'd set the power in the radio. Now initially it's going to be set for about 20 watts as people play with the radio, just in case, right? In this case, people don't realize that's a thing. So I want you to know where it is, but initially it was limited to about 20 watts or so. The radio goes to 100 watts. You know, if you're doing a close contact or some trying to do weak signal stuff, you don't need 100 watts. So just kind of realize that. But here's where your power goes in. And the Flex will go from 0 to 100. Literally 0. So you can put the power on 0. You can make all your transmitters tests and all that stuff, and nothing goes out. The tuner actually has its own power settings. So when you click to auto-tune, no matter where your gain is set, it automatically switches to a different power setting for the tuning. So it's protected there. I'm sorry, that was gain. This is RF power right here. This is the one. RF gain, I don't think you'll see it in our radio. Wherever it is, if you see it on the Flex, wherever it is, that's a good setting for it. Mid-range seems to work pretty good. Some of the stuff you want to see, box stuff, etc. I'm trying to think, because this is a different picture. I think I pushed the buttons I want to push, so let me see if I can get back on the Flex again. There you go. So you should be able to hear the audio over while I'm playing some noise. And I could cheat. I could pull up I'm logged into the computer that has the radio on it, so I could cheat and look at the spectrum display. But I'll just run it down here to digital so you can hear. Somewhere down there. It's on AM. I don't know who left it there. Yeah, I'm not hearing nothing. Oh, but this is the Flex radio. It even says Flex 6500 there. Supposedly, this should show you the microphone on here, but I never see it. Maybe it's supposed to be up here. Maybe that's where they're talking about the TX meter. DigiU, that's what I was talking about, upper sideband for your voice, up in the high bands. Other stuff, antenna is disabled, should be disabled. I'll double check the settings. Well, actually, it doesn't matter. I'm an admin, so I can do whatever I want, right or wrong. Auto gain controls and stuff like that. Here's the RF bar. You see it's down to 5 watts right now. Other stuff you may want to play with. But like I said, this is the Flex. This is what you'll see. So there's your transmit button right there. Here's the tune button. This is the auto tuner, right? So this where it says HU, that's the auto tuner. You click that, it runs through its auto tune cycle. And right now it says in bypass mode. And so I'm thinking it's probably good. So if I click the tuner, it may not be working right. If I click the tuner, normally I'd go through and do its cycle. But if it's in bypass, right now on this antenna, what that means is the SWR is so good it doesn't need to tune it out, so it's running straight to the antenna. This tune button is what you would use if you had a manual tuner attached to it. And I think I can go and remove some of these buttons so you don't have as much stuff you don't need. But the Flex has this capability. You just hold the tune button, and it just sends a constant signal so that if you're playing with your manual tune controls, whatever you're using, you have a constant signal in. I'm not sure. Well, let me switch VFOs. I think it must be locked up on the other end. But I wanted to show you the buttons. And this is the display on the Flex. Like I said, upper sideband and the power settings, that kind of deal. All right, back to my test bed. Live television, folks. So the only thing I haven't shown you is what exactly the address is to the radio. I think I've covered all the pieces. It's kind of quick and dirty, really. I've pretty much demoed everything I want to demo. So right now I'm going to open it back up. I'd like to open it up for discussion at this point.
So you mentioned phone and digital. Is CW a possibility as well?
It is. It is possible. I don't use it. I'm not sure what it takes, but there's discussions on the Remote Ham website about exactly that, on how to interface a keyer to your computer through this system. You'll have to read those forums to figure out how well it works. They sell a product that does all that, but you're not required to use that particular product. Whatever you need, some kind of USB connector or something like that. But if you look up here at the top, I'm still sharing the screen. You see you have audio, that's where you set your path and the volumes and that kind of thing. You have control devices next. And this depends on what you're trying to do. But right here is the external PTT, external CW, external CAT. So that's where you would interface with the software to interface to the remote radio, if that makes sense. So you may be using, for example, Ham Radio Deluxe on your end to control the radio. So you could use Ham Radio Deluxe on your computer, interfacing with this interface on, I think you have to use basically the external CAT. There's actually stuff built in for Ham Radio Deluxe. But whatever it is, and that's all in the instructions also, but you can use Ham Radio Deluxe interface to the software. But you can kind of see, if you had a K3, you could actually interface that to this software. Or, don't know what this Orb Control, the Orb Control device, that's the thing they sell. So that's actually, you plug your keyer in, and I think some other things they'll do. And then, like I said, this external push-to-talk, your CW or your CAT, whatever you're using the interface, through some serial to USB device, no doubt, that would plug in there. Also, as long as you're on that subject, now here's virtual Ham Radio Deluxe. So that's how this would be the output to your device. But I was doing my digital modes, and to do that, you use the virtual K3, where this interface sends out data to, for example, WSJTX, so that it's getting all the usual stuff it would get if it was hooked up to a radio, but instead it's getting it through this interface, through the internet, to the radio wherever it's at. So that's where this stuff comes into play. Control devices would be something you're using to access it, and then virtual devices, that's where it's acting like that virtual device to talk to your equipment. And whatever you're going to use, there's info in the forums. It's outside my knowledge level, but there is some information on that Gloucester County HAM's website that I talked about, and they've got documents on how to do some of this stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just a couple other questions. I appreciate that. So, like, how have you seen it? Like, well, what happens when like a high SWR condition happens? Like when there's, you know, something gets out of alignment and you're trying to use it, and you know, is there something that would kind of flag, hey, you've got a problem, you should stop transmitting?
The flex is pretty good. The flex itself will drop back, and normally, like I said, when I was trying to show the demo, it actually shows some different stuff. And so I think I need to reboot it. But normally it'll say bypass and success or mem or something like that. So it must be something broke on it, on the interface. But that's how the flex tells you if it's good, is they'll say bypass success or bypass mem, which means it's a stored location, and bypass means it's good. Now, if you manually click bypass, that also bypassed the tuner. But if you hit tune and it goes to bypass, it should be good. But that's a good question. I'll have to take a look and see why it's showing that, because I was doing both and it was just fine. But that's a good question.
Okay. I appreciate that. And my last question is just deconfliction. Like, do we have I know we're kind of on the technical side, but when we're in a position to start using it, is there some kind of thought about how we would deconflict, you know, usage of this so that we're not trying to use it at a certain time, like some kind of a schedule or sign-up process?
Exactly. You know, that's the big problem that we created when we found the solution, right? So the solution created a bigger problem. Right now, for right now, what we're getting trying to improve our position is we're using the Groups.io page, and there is if you go to the Groups.io page, there's a new subcategory about remote radio users, and you can request membership in that. If you want to be a member in it, I request that you change your profile for the Cowtown group in the Groups.io page. Change your profile so it shows your call sign somewhere in there as your username or something like that, so that we can confirm the call sign to the membership. And then if you could, you know, somewhere in there, throw in what your class is, your license class. But in that subgroup, there's a calendar. And for right now, until we have a better solution in place, just make an entry in the calendar like you would, and just make a note in there, you know, using there's only one radio right now. So you're using the radio at such time to such time, and you know, and that's that. Once we get going, we'll need to add bands in use, because we'll need to deconflict that with the other radio. But for right now, it's just the one flex radio, and you know, just put in what you're going to do. And if somebody's already put in for that time, I'll see first come, first serve.
Gotcha. Oh, and I just one quick last one. So I guess the flex is already set up for what antennas, and you know, so we couldn't select a band that the antenna is not resonant on, right?
Correct. Right now, for this software, the antenna is locked out, and you can't switch antenna anyway, and it's limited to the bands that we can operate in. But also on the flex itself, I've also disabled all the bands that are outside the antenna limits on it. So it cannot be operated outside the antenna bands, not even just the ham bands, but it can't be outside the antenna bands right this second. It cannot be operated outside your license bands, but not outside the antenna bands / ham bands. In other words, there's a preset category for the different ham bands, and so I can basically set up which ham bands we can operate in, and those are the only ones available. Make sense?
Yes, thank you.
But the software lets me limit it even further. So you can't select anything that that the radio and the antenna can't handle.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You bet.